Today we're going to talk about research ethics. We'll start by defining research ethics, or at least discussing what that means. Then we'll talk about why we need research ethics. We'll then talk about what makes up ethical research, and then we'll discuss some of the what is research ethics concerned with. So to start, we'll just go over the principles of research ethics that came up from the Swedish Council for Research in Humanities. And I'll just start off by telling you that these came up because of abuses in research that have happened. There's some notable cases which you've read from the readings this week, and we'll talk a little about some of those cases within this lecture. But I want you just to, obviously, there's a reason this is a reaction to research abuses. And so one of the principles we start off with is that experimental subjects ought to be given free, informed consent to the research. So the research subjects should know what they're getting into, and this statement goes beyond just having the participants know what's going on, but they need to be conscious of what is happening. So within this statement, that also includes, does the research participant are they able to make this decision? Can they freely decide to participate? So the idea is that if someone who is coerced to participate in a research subject, are they actually giving their free and informed consent? Do prisoners, are they able to freely to consent to participate in research studies when they're being told, they may get certain benefits that they would otherwise not get from being a research subject. Also, groups like children or people with mental disabilities or learning disabilities, they may not be able to give their free and informed consent to be in the research. So these are issues that we need to think about if you were to do your research with using human subjects. Additionally, the research subjects have the right to decide the conditions under which they will have access to research data. So these are principles that there's data being collected, and it's a sensitive nature. And obviously, when you're doing a research project, giving the research subject the right to know how they can access that data that's being collected from them or about them. There's also a principle that no unauthorized person will have access to research data. So that, again, this is something that the research subject is saying that, they're not giving up all rights to the data that was collected from them. They may decide they want to participate on some level of research, but that doesn't mean that they want to give information about themselves freely to anyone. And lastly here, the data cannot be used outside the research project for commercial or non-scientific purposes. So again, here it points to the limiting the scope of what the research is, so that again, people who participate in research as subjects are not again just waiving their rights completely to any information that's gathered about themselves. Now, why research ethics? So if you read the readings, you'll know that there were quite a few historical abuses in research. And if you want to go ahead and click on the next YouTube video here, it just talks a little bit about some of the more recent case of research ethics violations, or at least a recently in the news. This actually goes back to the issue which you may have heard of, where in Guatemala the U.S. government actually funded and used prisoners to be part of a syphilis study. Now again, the notion that people may have been involved in studies which, there may be a valid public good that can be gained from this research, but at the cost of harming the individual, and not just harming the individual or putting them at risk, but also the individuals don't know that this is happening. This is one of the reasons why we are so concerned with ethics within research. We want to make sure that people that they know what they're getting into if they wish to participate. That they have full and informed consent, basically. But the notion, in the past and in some cases today, we still have people who think, well, there is a public good that we're hoping to get out of this, and it may supersede the individual harm that will be brought on by a research project. But again, the notion that we want to convey is that, if individual chooses to put themselves in harm, that they are properly informed with what to expect or what's going to happen. So now that can come at odds with the design of certain research projects, to maybe accurately get information uh, when measuring, whether it's the behaviors from, accurately being able to tell, how someone will act, like when they're being asked to do some, to cause harm to someone else, like if they knew what the research was about, people may not want to be involved, And so, but again, the idea that the that the participant should be informed of the research, that should supersede this need to know something, Uh, it's putting back the humanity into what we're doing, you know. And there within research, there are harm that can come from both the product and the process of research. So what we mean by that, the product of research, if we looked in the readings talking about the tests, the nuclear bomb testing that was done in the Southwest U.S., that those tests, those above ground nuclear testing, those created high levels of radiation that still persist to some level, in the areas, and that definitely exposed large numbers of people to high levels of radiation. And so now the product of that research, so that is the research itself, that has caused harm, and in some cases continues to cause harm. Whereas the process, the way in which research is conducted. So in this case, you could argue that both the process and the product of research have caused harm. But the process is, during the research itself, that there is harm being caused. So there's a distinction, and we need to know that research ethics concerns both, how research is conducted to make sure that the people and the non-human actors in research are not harmed, but also that the products, that what comes out of the research, that doesn't harm individuals as well. Um, Now, what you may, depending on what your stance on, the there is certainly something to be said about ethical research for non-human actors, which is not really covered well in our readings, and it's a contentious subject. There are people who may not value the the harms to the environment or to wildlife or and that these same principles that we've used here for research ethics may not apply in those cases. Some researchers do, and it's something that's been growing. But again, this is within the research ethics; it has not transferred over fully. But I just want you to be aware of that.